Hi, this is Jeff with the INTJ equation, and today I'm joined by Makua. She's originally from Nigeria, and she believes that she's a ENFP. I'm kind of getting INFP vibes, but she is a little bit nervous, which is completely understandable. So, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Um, hey, my name is Makua, and I'm a psychology and sociology major. Um, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad you took the time to join us today. So when did you discover like typology, MBTI, and stuff like that? I know you were talking a little bit before we started recording, and you said that you took the MBTI tests, which are kind of notoriously unreliable at times, but you tested INFP and ENFP. Do you want to share your experiences with that a little bit?
Well, I first discovered it in high school. I don't remember which one of my friends mentioned it, but someone did. So I took the test and I got INFP. And for the longest time, I believed I was INFP. And then I took it again in college when I first started college, and I got ENFP, and that was a little bit confusing for me because I do tend to get really nervous when meeting new people, and I tend to like close off a bit. So later on, I discovered cognitive functions because I didn't want to rely on the test, and it took like a lot of reading for me to be like, okay, maybe I am ENFP. But like you said, I do often like exhibit INFP traits, and it's I guess maybe what I want maybe kind of influences me saying I'm ENFP, but I do notice I'm far more extroverted when I'm not like on the phone with people. So it depends.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. You could be a little bit nervous. I just did a podcast with a girl who she thinks she's an INFP, but I'm pretty sure she's an ENFP. So there's a lot of stuff that's up in the air. So it's understandable. All right. What are your experiences being like an ENFP? I know you said that you had some ADHD, and the way we found each other was on Reddit, and you're kind of like telling people like, like don't ignore your ADHD diagnosis. I know ENFPs are often kind of treated like they have ADHD. So we were discussing like, ADHD could be PTSD, which is trauma related. It can be misdiagnosed very easy, but you're pretty certain that you have ADHD, correct?
Yes. So with that, I feel like I've noticed with a lot of people with ENFP, especially on the Reddit, I've I've heard so many stories of people that said they had ENFP, but then got the ADHD diagnosis, and but after going through therapy, they realized they were another personality type. So I feel like a lot of people with ADHD tend to gravitate towards the ENFP personality type because it seems to fit whatever they're experiencing. But I've also noticed that ADHD seems to be a really good diagnosis given to children, even when it's not the case. So with PTSD, I've been doing research on this where trauma and ADHD, they have a lot of similar symptoms. So it can be really misdiagnosed in children, especially children that come from abusive households. And it's really kind of difficult to see whether or not what the difference is. I guess the issue is seeing why they're exhibiting these symptoms and not what's causing it rather than what the symptoms actually are. And it seems, I guess, a lot of adults like to if they see a misbehaving child, they want to find a way to fix them. And giving them an ADHD diagnosis seems to be the easiest way, even if it's not the right way. And for me, I found out I was ADHD a few months ago, actually. And that kind of like turned away my whole world. When you're an adult and you realize you get an ADHD diagnosis, it's very different than being a child and getting an ADHD diagnosis. It's kind
Mhm.
of like an explanation for most of your entire life. And you realize that you're having such a hard time and no one else was. And it guess it made you feel a certain way. And like, I don't know. I feel like there's a line to be drawn between ADHD and other disorders. I do know when I go on a bipolar subreddit and other disorders, a lot of them will say that they got diagnosed with ADHD. And some people with ADHD will say they got diagnosed with bipolar. And the issue is trying to see where that could have come from the person. I know for women, it's more common for them to be diagnosed with like emotional disorders like depression or anxiety, while men tend to be more diagnosed with ADHD disorders over emotional disorders. And you kind of have to see that there's, I guess, these overlaps, and psychiatrists and therapists, they're not like, I guess, omniscient. They're not going to know what it is that is causing this, but I do kind of hope that things get better in the future, because there seems to be a lot of like stigma around mental illness and mental disorders in general, and it influences the diagnosis that people receive. So I do hope that things change for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one big issue I have with psychology. It treats everybody as they're the same. And, obviously we're not all the same. I think there's definitely ways that we could all treat each other. Like I used to work with kids with behavioral health issues, and I would talk to them and they were diagnosed with ADHD. And oftentimes they were just starter types, like I was discussing with you, like ESFPs, ENFPs, ENTPs, or ESFJs. And they're just all over the place, starting new projects, bouncing around. They're not really meant to sit in front of a book and read. I mean, you can definitely do that, but school try to teach everybody like they're STJs, like ESTJs or ISTJs. It's a very STJ system, and it doesn't fit everybody else. If you don't fit in that paradigm, there's something wrong with you. And I think I just have a huge problem with that. So could you
Yeah.
maybe, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, I totally agree. When I was younger, I sat around and read books all day. So I was not the stereotypical ADHD child. And it was, even though I started to struggle in school and I wasn't able to concentrate, I was like missing things like showers and everything, like was going messy in my life. As long as I was obedient in school, no one noticed that I had issues. So you can tell, like, I do tend to put people in a box, and if you don't fit into that box, you're suddenly like suffering from some disorder, and it's very toxic and unhealthy.
Yeah, it is not very helpful. As an INTJ myself, I've been accused of being autistic, a psychopath, because I really don't pick up on FE at all. And it's just very struggle and not very helpful. Like for years, I thought something was wrong with me. And then I just kind of kept researching, like, okay, this is just the way I am. I was diagnosed with avoidant personality disorder, but I'm kind of overcoming that due to some stuff that, happened in my own life. How would you differentiate like symptoms of ADHD with being an ENFP?
Um, it's actually a little complicated, because when I see the memes and like the jokes on the MBTI subreddit and other subreddits, I'd be like, oh, this is funny and stuff like that. But I noticed, because my stuff was really getting into the way of my way of life, like me not showering for days or even weeks, because showering was a lot complicated process for me, and eating was a complicated process for me. Like I heard that people gain weight over quarantine. I lost weight over quarantine because I had no external motivation to eat or do other things or keep a schedule. So if it required work for me to do food, it was too many steps, and I just wouldn't go and eat. And taking a shower was too many steps, so I wouldn't go and shower. And at first people thought I was depressed. I didn't have any overwhelming sadness or anything. And when I talked to my doctor, I told her I'd been struggling with this since elementary school. And just no one had noticed, because I tried to pretend I was okay and do well in school and stuff like that. But in high school, I failed 2 classes. And my teachers are just like, she's not doing as well as she used to do. And I'm just like, I don't know what you want me to do. And at this point, when I was in the ENFP subreddit, I started looking up and stuff. And the first notice of me thinking I had ADHD was someone in the ENFP subreddit that said, I thought I was ENFP. Turns out I am INFJ with ADHD. And I sat there for a sec and I was just like, what? Does this make sense? And I kind of brushed over it. Then I saw someone else say something similar. And I went to my doctor, I told her what I was struggling with, and she was like, I think you have ADHD. And so she walked me through the symptoms and everything. And I talked to her about my life. And like after that, and another visit, I came out with an ADHD diagnosis. And it's really more complicated when you're an adult, because as an adult, it's way harder to get a diagnosis. And if you get one, it really has to be that something's wrong and you're really, really struggling with it, or symptoms related to ADHD. So while I'm children, I'm not usually sure whether or not they have ADHD or not, because of the tendency to put any hyperactive child in that box. As more adult in adults, I'm usually more sure that they have it, because it really is a long process and a hard thing to accept in yourself. Okay, sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, I think that's just a huge struggle that a lot of people are going through. Are you on medication right now? Have you ever been on any medication for it?
I actually did get put on medication, except since I have some pretty like bad anxiety, at times the medication that they gave me was increasing that anxiety. And I would like go the entire day under the buzz of anxiety, and I didn't like it at all, even though I could notice I was slightly better at able to concentrate. Oh, except with that medication, instead of helping me concentrate on my schoolwork, I was somehow able to concentrate on everything else that wasn't my schoolwork. So that was just like, okay, what's going on? But yeah, and then I haven't taken it for a few days because I hated how it made me feel, and I'm supposed to get a new medication, but I was supposed to email my doctor because my insurance didn't want to accept it, and I haven't done that yet because I keep forgetting, and I don't know why. Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, I need to get that done.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable to be forgetful and things like that. What medicine are you taking, if you don't mind me asking?
It's methylphenidate.
So it's like,
Huh?
it's guanfacine. Is that another name for it? I think.
Yeah, I think another name would be like it can be used under different names. So I don't know about squamfacine. I do know it can also be used under Ritalin, I think.
Really?
So
I know they usually, in my experience, they started kids off at least on like something called mild called guanfacine. It's actually like a blood pressure medication, if I'm correct, and it kind of like treats ADHD symptoms. They didn't start you off anything mild. They just put you straight on a narcotic then, huh?
well, she put me on the lowest dose possible, but as someone who's both short and slightly underweight, I'm guessing that the lowest dose possible was not good for me. So yeah. Anyway, my doctor's trying to put me on a different one, which is normally used on children. I don't remember the name of it, but he says that he's going to put my lowest dose since it seems I'm really sensitive to ADHD medication. So I hope that works out.
I think most people are pretty sensitive to most ADHD medications, at least like the Ritalin and what's the other big one? I can't think of the name of it now.
Adderall?
Adderall, there we go. But they're very closely to meth, like the street drug. They're only like a few molecules off from methamphetamine.
Yeah, what I've noticed with people with ADHD when they take like drugs, like it really is like trying to figure out which one is right for you, because not any there's a singular one that works on everyone. But I have noticed with people with ADHD that when they take ADHD meds, if you really have ADHD, usually it helps you just become more concentrated. Yet, in order to get the feeling everyone else does, that they want to get from having stuff like ADHD, you have to take way more. So maybe it's just because of the dopamine issue. Because I noticed that people with ADHD have lower dopamine levels than regular people. So
I know you said you struggled with appetite before. When you're on the medication, has that like killed your appetite even further?
yeah, the methylphenidate that basically murdered my appetite when I was supposed to be trying to gain weight. So that was not a good experience, because it was like trying to shovel dirt into my mouth, and it sucked like big time. So And my doctor didn't think it was going to be that big of an issue, because the reason I was struggling to eat before wasn't because I wasn't hungry, because I didn't notice I was hungry, because I didn't notice I was hungry, and because preparing food was just a lot of work for me to do, even though it could have been something simple as preparing a sandwich. And she didn't think it was going to be that big of an issue until I took it, and I was like, my appetite is like basically gone. So
Okay. And just so I want to make a bill of disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I was going for psychology myself. I'm not in school currently. I'm just taking a break to kind of do this project, but I'm not a doctor and I can't, give any medical advice or anything like that or anything. It's just like my experiences working in behavioral health and just kind of observing kids. So like you said, it's a lot of work for you to like make something to eat or take a shower. I think that's pretty common with like PTSD. Have you ever looked at like PTSD or talked to a doctor about PTSD symptoms? I know they overlap quite a bit with ADHD.
actually, when she was looking at me, and my doctor saw my symptoms and stuff like that, and she heard my trauma, she was like, she referred me to psychiatrists, and she told them to look at me for PTSD. And when I went there and he talked to me, he decided I didn't have PTSD. I was just ADHD with a bad case of anxiety. And it was a little confusing at first for me. I was like, huh? What is this? I have anxiety. But I started to notice that I probably did have anxiety. And I can't like figure out, with preparing food and stuff, I thought was PTSD related, but I noticed that the work that it wasn't, because that I was annoyed preparing food and showering because of all the steps involved, and I didn't want to focus on it. Usually with PTSD, they struggle to focus on their tasks because whatever caused their trauma, is on their mind, and it's not allowing them to focus properly on their task. With me, it wasn't that anything was on my mind. It's just I couldn't pull my full concentration on what I was doing. And if I did, it required a lot of energy to do so.
Okay. Speaking on a subject of trauma, would you mind sharing that with the audience a little bit? I know it can be tough to share.
So yeah, when me and my twin sister, I have an identical twin sister. When we were younger, like below the age of 5, cousin of ours sexually assaulted us, and no one else knew. At first, I didn't even think it was real, but after dreaming about it for like a long while when I was younger, I was like, oh, this is. And then I talked to my twin sister. I realized it wasn't like a false instant; it was very much real. And I guess it influenced a lot of the way I thought of myself when I was younger. I remember thinking I was dirty and like no one could love me when I was younger, and it influenced a lot of the way I acted and stuff like that. And now I'm a little more numb towards it. And I've noticed that because I never really dealt with what happened back then, I just kind of pushed it aside since I didn't talk to anyone about it. And when I got older, I started talking more about it. And it was usually came up in jokes and stuff like that. So I thought, it was something lighthearted. I'd be like, oh, this happened. And it wasn't until a few people just looked at me weirdly that I realized I had like a serious issue. And yeah, but I would say that a lot of what happened when younger, a lot of the way I thought and acted was related to what happened back then. And I don't know how it really deals into how I am right now, but I do notice I'm a little sensitive to some topics related to it.
Yeah, that does. I mean, it's a horrible what happened to you and your sister. It's just all too common. I'm sorry you had to go through that. It's just, I just hear it over and over, and it just makes me sick to my stomach. And I'm sorry you guys had to go through all that. What age did you bring this up to your parents, or have you ever talked to your parents about this?
I was 18 when I finally brought it up to my mom, and it was actually after finding out the cousin that assaulted me died.
Oh,
So she was like, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" And I was just like, "Well, I didn't really think much about it after a certain point, and I didn't really want to talk to you about it because I talked to her about other things, and she'd blow it out of proportion, and this wasn't really something I wanted her to make a big deal out of to our family." And then once the cousin died, I really didn't want her to make a big deal out of it, but I told her anyway, just so that she would know. And we decided not to tell anyone in our family because the aunts of my aunt, the mother of my cousin who assaulted me, when she was 12, she'd gone to the doctor and came back pregnant. And her cousin was a child from that incident. And we didn't want her to have to deal with not only the trauma of having gotten raped when she went to the doctor's appointment, but finding out her child from that rape had, I guess, raped me and my sister. So
that's tough. And you said this happened in Nigeria, right? You said that your
yeah.
family's originally from Nigeria, but you're born in the United States in Texas. Okay. And you said you haven't been back to Nigeria since that incident. Was it a one-time incident or was it reoccurring, or do you remember?
I actually don't remember anything else. Like, see, when I was younger, all I remember is that one incident. But after talking to my brother, and he said he did something to him too. So I don't think it was a one-time incident. So, but I have been back since then. And so I went back once for my grandmother's funeral, which was, I think, 2 years after we left Nigeria.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about your experience of being at least an NFP. What do you feel like being like an ENFP is like? How would you describe it?
Oof. I guess I describe it as trying really hard to cheer people up while like hiding what I'm actually feeling and not ever knowing what's going on, but like butting my head into conversations because I want to be involved. That's how I am like most of the time.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say there's one singular way to be an ENFP. I've met several different ones.
Oh, I think I lost
Because
you.
like ENFP seems to be, oh, you lost me?
Oh yeah, I think you froze up there for a minute. It's okay. I'll just go through and edit it out.
Okay. Well, what was I gonna say? I actually don't know. Oh, this is complicated. Oh, I don't think there's one singular way to be an ENFP. I think there's different ways you can, because even with like online, I see ENFP as this like, I don't know, golden retriever type. And I'm just like, what is this personality stereotype that's going on? But it's kind of funny. But yeah, I don't really know. For me, I never really thought about it. I use the fact that I'm an ENFP to like look inside of myself and figure out how I work and how I can improve myself.
Okay. That's good. So you said you're actually quite extroverted in person. What are some of your like hobbies and activities you like to do? It sounds like you like to read and things like that.
I like reading, but don't enjoy it as much as when I was younger because I struggle to sit down long enough to read. Like I used to be able to hyper focus and read books for hours and not sleep, and then go to school, come back and read books again. And I haven't been able to do that for a long time. And it's a little annoying because it used to be one of my favorite pastimes. It still is, but I'm not able to do it as long as I was before. I also like to write, but same issue as reading. I can't do it as long as I used to be able to do. And I like to, I would say I like to watch movies, but I haven't watched a whole movie since 2012. And yeah, I struggle to sit down to watch movies. I've always struggled to sit down to watch movies when I was younger, but it got worse the more I avoided it. And since I avoid it now completely, I realized that I haven't been able to build up the, I guess, I don't know, resistance or something. So I hope one day in the future I'll be able to like work through this issue. But until then, movie watching isn't really in my repertoire. I do like sewing and drawing. Even I don't draw as much as I used to. Oh wow. There's a lot of things I don't do as much as I used to. I like to make jewelry, and yeah.
I think those are like really good coping mechanisms. If you like, I know you said you have struggles reading now, but there's a book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Dr. Bruce Perry. He really is a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist. I think he double majored, and he looks at kids who've been traumatized and adults who've been traumatized, and kind of like points out the difference between ADHD and PTSD and like the different ways of treating it and different medications to explore. So it's definitely something you could check out if you haven't. It's a really good book. It's just like it talks to like several kids, and he's worked with kids like during the Waco cult thing with Stephen Korish, or is that his name? Yeah, something like that. Steve Korish, with the whole Waco standoff with the cult, and just like kids have been traumatized and stuff like that, and his experiences with it. It's a really good book. I guess he recently wrote a book with Oprah. I haven't read it yet, but I definitely want to look into that as well. How was like your struggles being a college student with ADHD symptoms?
Well, luckily, my college has a lot of accommodations for students with ADHD. They allow you to have longer test taking times. You can also test take by yourself, and you can also take this note taking app that they give you, and it will record the lectures and help you take notes while you're listening to the lectures. So that has been somewhat helpful, since as a college student, quarantine like basically killed like me academically this last semester, because I had no incentive to do well. I had no structure or anything. So it was legit me sitting in front of a computer screen for a couple hours a day and not retaining anything, because I couldn't sit down and concentrate. So I'd be walking around the room daydreaming or doing something else while class was going on. And yeah, this was not a good experience for me. I do know before this, I failed a class in community college because after turning in the first assignment, I could not bring myself to do any of the other assignments. I'd sit down and do it, and I wouldn't even sleep at night, just sitting in front of my computer screen. I could not do it at all. And I feel like at that point, my mom should have noticed I had a serious issue, since this wasn't the first time it had happened, but it just kind of before I was able to push through it, because my mom is my main like motivation to do well, because I want to do well for her, but I've noticed I have to want to do well for myself, and that's something I struggle with.
Okay. And being raised by your mom and dad, was that a supportive environment, or was it a challenging environment, would you say?
Well, my parents had an arranged marriage. So, and it wasn't a happy one. My mom disliked her marriage very much. My dad wasn't a very good husband. And when I was younger, I distinctly remember them fighting a lot, and me and my sister hiding behind a couch to see and waiting for them to stop fighting. And finally, like in 2013, 14, my mom ended up getting divorced from my dad. And my dad lives in Texas while we live in North Carolina. So yeah, that I wouldn't say my childhood was the best, I guess. My mom is consistently trying to make up for that, but she tends to be a little bit of a helicopter mom at times. And I've noticed like a lot of my apprehension with talking on the phone comes from the fact that I don't have much of an experience with that, even because my mom has always tried to do everything for me. And now that I'm living myself on campus, it's an experience, and a little difficult for me, but I'm hoping to learn from it. So,
have you ever typed your parents? What types do you think they are?
I don't know much about my dad, but my mom, I think she'd be an ENFJ or ESTJ.
ENFJ, ESTJ. Okay, they're both structure types. I could see some similarities there. Okay. And you said your twin sisters, and you think an ENFP too, but it's kind of ambiguous, up in the air sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you said you had an older brother, right? Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
What type do you think he is?
Okay, honestly, don't know.
Don't know. Okay.
Because I used to think he was pretty introverted, but then I realized he's actually really an extroverted. But in the house, he liked to keep to himself, away from other all of us, since it was him, the one dude in the family, and then three women who honestly didn't know what they were doing most of the time. So I don't really know about him. I do know that he likes doing stuff at his own pace, and he likes to think deeply on what he like wants, but I have never really pinpointed a type for him, because I did feel like I'd have to observe him for a while to truly be able to say he's a certain type.
Okay, fair enough. At least you're not jumping to conclusions. That's good. Have you had any experience with INTJs? Have you, I mean,
Um, I feel like I knew what I would describe as an INTJ in high school, but I guess we weren't really the closest, except when I'd annoy him, so he'd come do something with me. Um, I really don't know what he thought about me, but I think he enjoyed the moments that we'd play games together. So
you played like video games or board games? What kind of games?
usually card games,
Card games.
like Uno and other things. I think I'm hoping he somewhat enjoyed it. I'm like legit hoping. I hope I wasn't like a horrible existence in his life, but since he went along with it, maybe he did. So
Yeah, if he's an INTJ, if he didn't want to do it, he probably wouldn't have done it. So how is like your trauma and your upbringing, how's that affected like personal relationships? Are you okay with having personal relationships, plenty of friends, boyfriends, girlfriends? I don't know what your orientation is.
um I've actually never dated in my life. And I don't know if I plan to at any point. Friendship wise, I was always really awkward when in elementary school and stuff like that. Because like when I was in elementary school, I was bullied a little bit because I was the awkward child, and my sister was always in and out of the hospital. When I got to middle school, I I was wearing school uniform because my mom from Nigeria, she thought school uniform was the proper way to do things. But of course, I was the only child in American public school wearing uniform, and that was not a good experience. But as I got older, I always was really apprehensive. I tried to make myself act the way I thought other people viewed me and how I was supposed to act. And that didn't really go well in middle school for me, because I went from this really shy crybaby child to this girl who roasted everyone in sixth and seventh grade. In eighth grade, I was kind of a little outspoken and stuff. And high school came around and I kind of quieted down again. And high school was a weird experience for me because I realized people actually wanted to be friends with me and talk with me. But since I spent like my life extremely conscious of whatever the people thought of me, it was a really weird thing to get used to. And since I couldn't, and I was still extremely awkward with that, I didn't have as many friends as I could have in high school. But by senior year, I had way more friends, and it was a learning experience, I would say. And I'm not sure how, like, as long as if someone's willing to come up to me and talk to me, then I'm totally like okay with it. But because of how awkward it was for me growing up and how how much I think about what other people think of me, I struggle with, I guess, I don't know, like I don't really know how to describe it. Maybe just getting like if I can meet you, I'm willing to talk with you and stuff like that. But if I after you if you give me my your number or something like that, me texting or calling you back is like nearly an impossibility. I really do struggle with that. And I sometimes think, why would they want to see me again? And I have noticed it goes back to my childhood trauma, because when I was younger, I used to think I was very dirty and I didn't understand why anyone would want to hang out with me. So it's still something I'm working with.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reoccurring theme too. It's kind of like how I felt growing up, like, like I'm not worthy enough to have friends or relationships, because I was treated a certain way and I was treated a certain way for a reason, but we're children and as innocent, so it's not really our fault. Um Okay, so when did you learn about like MBTI and typology? You said that was in high school, so you're pretty young, so that wasn't too long ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did they do like teach it in school at all, or was it just like something you found online or talked to some friends about?
It was something I found online and talked to a friend about. And I think I first heard about it in middle school, but I didn't actually like take the test or anything until high school. And it was, I thought it was cool at first. I was like, oh, this is fun and stuff like that. And when I got older, like just a while ago, I was like, maybe I should like get back into it again. And I did. And it's fun. It's interesting to just listen to people talk about their personalities and listen to the stereotypes and stuff like that. It's really interesting to notice. I forgot this one post someone made that was talking about how they thought they were introverted, but they realized they were just an extrovert with social anxiety. And it's really difficult when you have to separate whether or not you're actually introverted and extroverted and whether or not it's caused by anxiety or something you experienced in the past. And I feel like that's really complicated, probably a little difficult to figure out, especially if you don't really think about how you interact with people. But that was an interesting post that I read. And what really made me think about whether or not I was introverted or extroverted.
Yeah, you come off really introverted to me because you haven't changed the subject one time in this whole conversation. Usually like extroverted, they'll like, oh yeah, and this, and they'll bring up new points and stuff like that. So I'm definitely getting a strong introvert vibe from you.
Yeah, yeah. I honestly would say I was introverted if I didn't know how I acted in like with other people, not on phone calls and stuff like that. And I tend to stay on topic especially if I was given like a certain assignment to do something. I get really nervous. I don't want to stray from it because I'm nervous about what will be said and whether or not I'm being irresponsible or not. And there's always this voice in my head telling me, Makua, like you have to do this right and something like that. And if you go past that, then it's yeah, it's gonna be very difficult for me at times,
Yeah.
especially on video calls and stuff like that. And I have been like my psychiatrist when I walked to the psych point, I sat there and I was like, hey, and he said hey, and I was like, hey, and I didn't say anything else. And he was trying to ask me questions. And then he finally asked me, are you shy? And I'm like, no. Like, well, you've hardly talked or anything. You just kind of punched in on yourself. I'm like, well, this is new and I'm nervous and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And once he left, his assistant on the side, we started talking and we ended up talking about all the matter of these different topics. And then he comes back in to talk to me. And he looks at each other and like, y'all are talking? He's like, yeah, she's actually really talkative. It was kind of funny.
Yeah, I get it. Like you said, go back a little bit in the conversation, like when the pandemic hit and you had to go virtual and you struggled really bad with your academics. I worked with kids during that time and it was a very stressful period for all of us. And you definitely weren't alone with kids just not being able to socialize more on well, not that you're a kid or anything, but just even like I talked to adults that had transitioned to online learning. It's something that I prefer. I always take online classes because I like getting up and doing my own thing. I can stay on task pretty easy. So I'm definitely fortunate in that area. But yeah, so I understand. And thank you for taking the time and doing this and, breaking your own comfort zone. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me to talk. It's not something I often, I guess, well, no, I do talk about myself quite a bit, honestly, but it's the first time I've ever been invited to a podcast. So that was, this was a good experience. I'm, I'm trying to like talk, but my head is like going, no, Makua, you should stop talking. But
Oh,
no,
you're fine. Talk away. I'm not here to judge you.
yeah, no, I'm trying to get past the voice. Like whenever I want to say something that's even slightly off topic, I like rein myself back because I don't want to be seen as a certain way. And I realize that I have really big issues with that I'm trying to work through. But yeah, I did enjoy talking with us. It did give me new things to think about. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. To go back to your childhood a little bit again, did your mom ever notice like any anything was off, like behavioral wise for you? Did she ever get you like into a therapy or anything like that? Or is it just something that you did on your own?
Well, my mom was Nigerian, and in Nigeria, mental health isn't really talked or seen about. Like in Nigeria, they still lock up gay people in jail for being gay. So it's very backwards compared to America. When she moved over here, she thought that people getting it, they were just diagnosing any child with ADHD, even if they weren't. And while I did partially agree with her, she sort of didn't think that figuring out if you had anxiety disorder or ADHD would help someone, and she thought that it was just labeling them and limiting them. And while I also partially agreed with that, when I got older, she became very critical of it. It became really hard for me to talk with her about my struggles and what I was going through. It wasn't until recently when I got my ADHD diagnosis and I broke down in front of her crying and stuff like that. And she was like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. And yeah, so she also works in healthcare. She works with veterans. So she'd seen what like PTSD and stuff like that. And when she realized how her attitude had affected me and stuff like that, she was extremely sorry about it. And she felt like it was her fault. And it took a while for me to be like, no, it's not your fault. And she also thinks she ruined my childhood somewhat, because she said that if I had raised you in my house or maybe something like that. And I worry about her sometimes, but I do think she needs to get out more and see other people that's not us. Because I feel like me, my sister, and my brother are her whole life, and she needs to step out of the box.
Yeah, she's starting to sound more like an ESTJ rather than an ENFJ for me personally, but I don't know her, so it's kind of hard to say. So I like to start. You said you studied cognitive functions a little bit. How can you explain like how your decision making? I know it's probably a little hard with the ADHD symptoms and everything. Like, how do you make decisions? How do you like go day by day throughout your day? Like, I don't know, to just make a basic decision.
Oh wait, did my screen just go out?
Yeah, I just see your picture.
Okay, no, we're just gonna leave it like that now.
Oh,
On
that's
that
fine.
system. Okay, so for me, like my high, I actually never learned how to pronounce like, is it net, like NE, extroverted intuition? How do you pronounce that?
How do you
Is it
pronounce it? You said it correctly. Extroverted intuition.
okay? Well, I was like extroverted intuition. So with that, I've noticed it in that when people talk, I'm always trying to see why they're saying what they're saying, and I'm trying to see patterns in real life. Like for me, doing something is never just doing something. I'm always trying to see how they connect. And it's really how that was actually one of the things, one of that whole extrovert intuition was one of the reasons why I decided to go into psychology and sociology, because I wanted to see why people thought the way they thought, and why something's connected in society and how that connected to the individual, which is why I decided to major in psychology and sociology. And with the second, with introverted feeling, okay, wow, okay. So with introverted feeling, I noticed that I tended to be very considerate or just dwell a lot on how other people may feel and how I feel and how other people see me. And I tended to not be very open with that. It's something that I very much internalized. So yeah, I noticed that in my daily life. It's one of the reasons why I think sometimes I struggle with just being honest with myself, because I don't want to be seen as bad or weird, and I don't want to inconvenience anyone else.
Yeah, okay. All right. I don't know how much you know about other types. I just kind of asked this question to everybody. Do you have like a favorite type and a least favorite type?
Honestly, no. For me, I actually tend to like, okay, if I had to say, I tend to like types that are introverted and also types that are judgers and not like perceivers. It's kind of weird because like I wouldn't say I have anything against any type whatsoever. To me, as long as they're willing to hang out with me, I'm completely okay with whatever type I may think or they may think that they are. But if I had to choose, I'd be introvert and a judger just because it's easier for me to talk to introverts since I have slight, I guess, anxiety issues, and it's easy for me because if they're a lot of times they're willing to stay silent while I just babble on for like a good hour about random stuff, and I don't usually don't like other perceivers just because we're a little. I struggle to keep a schedule and do stuff on time, and oftentimes when I'm with other perceivers, they also struggle with that. So it's not very helpful to just my daily life or just living life in general.
So you find it easier to have someone that can kind of like keep you on task and keep you on schedule and keep you on point?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that kind of struggle with that. All right. Do you have any other questions for me? Well, first, before we go into that, what do you want other people to understand more about you? What would you like to share where they can kind of relate to you a little bit better?
Let's see. I would like to say that if you meet anyone who is struggling with trauma and stuff like that, that just not even just meeting anyone, like anyone in general, you never know what someone could be going through at the moment, what they experience, and you'd live a far more fuller life if you were to like just see and observe before opening your mouth. Is putting is that, and also as someone with ADHD, I'm a little against how ADHD is titled because it's really not indicative of what a lot of ADHD people experience because we're not lacking in attention and we just struggle to regulate our attention and other executive functions. And if I were to tell someone, it's just don't think of me through the stereotype that you normally see ADHD through. Because as someone who's ADHD inattentive type, I'm not usually as hyperactive as someone with a hyperactive type. And it's can be very difficult when you're put into a box and not allowed to show how you actually think, how you actually are. So just keep an open mind.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like you're that hyperactive at all. You've been able to sit here and maintain a conversation. And usually like people with like ADHD, like the attention hyperactivity disorder, they're up and around, moving around, they can't focus, they fidgeting and stuff a lot, but you're kind of staying on point, sitting in the same spot, sitting in, I guess, the toilet in your case.
Yeah, I'm sitting on a toilet. For me, my hyperactiveness shows up mentally and in my slight tics. Like I tend to, like right now, this entire time I've been swinging my leg back and forth and tapping my knee. So I don't really show it in big movements and stuff. I also show it that I tend to not look straight at people. I tend to look all over the place. So that is also a slight thing. But yeah, it's not really like the moving around and the big movements that a lot of people think all ADHD people experience. So I do tend to walk along. I pace a lot in my day-to-day life, and I didn't want to pace now because my roommates are out there. I don't like pacing in front of people because I think they might think I'm so.
Yeah, it kind of makes other people nervous. I notice like sometimes I'll pace like if I'm thinking or something because I got to be moving and stuff all the time too, just because I'm a movement type as well. There's like a different dichotomy between like movement and control people just kind of sit there and take their sweet time. Movement people just go 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 go. Yeah. Okay, what would you like to under? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, moving helps me think. Helps my keep my thoughts going because if I don't, I tend to get really distracted. So this time was me just trying to make sure I'm listening to what you're saying and making sure my knee didn't move my phone too much. So
I think you did really well. I mean, I understand like your history and your trauma and your personality type. So everything, I think you did really good, and I really appreciate everything you took the time to do. And I think it was really brave. And I think it's really important to share your story. You have a very important story and you've been through a lot. I think you're a very strong person for that.
oh, thank you.
Yeah. Just well, one final question that I have. What would you like to understand about others?
Um, I really wish there was. I would like to, a lot of times I'd like to see how others. I don't know. I like learning about how the people grew up and how it made them who they are at the moment. And I tend to be sometimes very intrusive in my questions without noticing I'm being intrusive in my questions, and I've been trying to fix that. But um, just other, especially with other types, if there was a thing where you could like ask them how their like upbringing influenced their current personality type and how they act, that would be very interesting.
So like their past experiences and like how their personality type handles it.
Yeah. I also like to know like when they clicked with their type, just because I tend to go between INFP and ENFP like a lot of the times. And um like even now, especially since I've now moved on to campus, I've noticed that I'm exhibiting more of an INFP personality half the time. So, and it's just been a struggle for me, especially now since it makes me anxious. Just the new situation makes me anxious a little. Like I'm both excited and anxious, and those two differing like emotions are is a little bit of a struggle for me right now. And
Yeah, I bet it is really tough. That's one thing I definitely do want to study eventually, is getting like trauma and how it affects each personality type. And I have a theory, like especially with like personality disorder, something that I've struggled with my whole life is like, does trauma affect different personality types and cause personality disorders? I think it's kind of like the cognitive functions are miscued in a way from the trauma, and I think we could find treatment methods with that direction. Like I'm an INTJ and I was traumatized and I had avoidant personality disorder, and I kind of came out a certain way because of my personality type. I think it's not that ABPD, avoidant personality, is exclusive to INTJs. It's just they're a very hard group to study because they don't like to go out and make themselves public. But yeah, it's just some things that I've been working on and stuff like that. So I appreciate the time. I think like the symptoms you're exhibiting and being an FP is kind of hand in hand of the way you interact with the world. Not that there's anything wrong with it or it's your fault. I think you're a child and you were a victim, and I think just mental health awareness and trauma is just a very overlooked thing, even in the United States in 2021, and something that we should definitely be allocating a lot more time and resources towards.
yeah, I absolutely think so. Like with quarantine and everything that's happened, I noticed that in my college, a lot more people sought out mental health services. And I feel like even though quarantine was so like brought so many negative consequences, like people losing their jobs, people being isolated from each other and stuff like that, I did notice like an up and like increase in people seeking out mental health services. So I'm hoping that more and more people will seek out counselors to talk with, and it will lead to maybe just healthier people overall. Because I'm a strong believer in that probably everyone needs therapy, because we all go through things that we oftentimes internalize, and being able to talk to someone is just would be very helpful in that journey.
Yeah, I think so too. And a lot of people just shy away with it, or they're too proud and they feel that they don't need it, or it doesn't have the time. And it's just so terribly underfunded. And Just working in the system. Like Arizona is like 49th out of 50 for like behavioral health in the country, and it's just a nightmare to get proper treatment to people. It's just really about politics and bureaucracy, not about helping people, and it's just a terrible situation.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's all that I have. Do you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything else you'd like to give the audience before you go?
I don't really have anything else to say except like just take care of yourself, please. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And life is slowly getting back on track currently. And I just keep a little longer to be able to find your steps. Like I know 2 people who committed suicide over quarantine, and just like if you feel like you can't do anymore, just please reach out. Isolation is not very good for anyone, and yeah, that's all.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this. I mean, a lot of people just can't open up and share their life and their experiences like you did. I really appreciate it. And I think you're a really strong person for doing that. Yeah, if you liked what you saw, please like, share, subscribe with other people, leave a comment below, tell us what you liked and what you didn't like. Also have a Discord server and a new subreddit, so I'll definitely put that in the description. You could also check out my website at www.intjequation.com. Thank you for going beyond the clickbait, and have a good day.